Milton, Florida is a little dot in Santa Rosa County, with a population somewhere around 10,000. The town is most well known for the naval air base housed within its borders, Whiting Field, which is one of the US Navy's two primary pilot training bases. However, for others, Milton is known for a few other things. Most notably its climate, which earned the town the 19th century nickname of Helltown because of its incurable humidity and rash of living pests, like mosquitoes. Some even called it Scratch Ankle because of the briar patches that grew below knee level along the river creeks and swamp beds. Milton is also known for a surprising amount of professional athletes that graduated from the town's school district in the 1990s and early 2000s. Football players Cortland Finnegan and Lawrence Tynes graduated from Milton High School, along with professional golfers Heath Slocum and Boo Weekley. Casper Van Dien, the actor most notable for being the lead in the feature film adaptation of Starship Troopers, also lived in Milton for a period of time. However, the thing that Milton has become known for in recent years is a rising population that is addicted to serious drugs. Now, for the record, I am not vilifying Milton alone in this issue. The entire First Judicial Circuit, which includes Escambia, Okaloosa, Walton, and the entirety of Milton's Santa Rosa County, has seen a dramatic increase of drug use, which has led to some fatal results. Florida alone saw less than 100 heroin related deaths in 2010 and 2011. By 2014, that number had increased to over 447, according to the Santa Rosa Press Gazette. And that number continued to rise through 2016, with the death of 779 people. Many attribute this to the addition of the drug fentanyl to many heroin concoctions, but it is indeed indicative of a larger problem plaguing the area. Outside of heroin and other opiates, Milton has become infamous in the local area for featuring an outlandish number of stories involving methamphetamine. If you simply search for stories involving the town itself and the word methamphetamine, you'll be greeted by a host of stories regarding meth labs being discovered, dealers being arrested with hundreds of grams of the drug, you name it. Throughout my digging, I even found a meme a longtime Milton resident had made, with someone joking about being able to get meth from 47 different people, but being unable to find any good weed. While that may sound a little bit funny, I do want to remind you that for every joke, there is an unironic truth behind it. That, while I may reference statistics in regard to drug casualties, for every single number that gets added to the pile, there are numerous people involved who have their hearts broken. Not just family and friends, but coworkers and neighbors of those afflicted, who had no idea there was anything wrong with the person that they knew until it was too late. Every drug addict has a story to tell, something that started them on the wrong path moving forward. Very few addicts get to choose their addiction. They may have made a snap decision to try something, but that addiction soon consumes them, and eventually begins to define them as a person. I think it's important to remember that. Now, while it's easy to brush off addicts as junkies or somehow lesser than us, at the end of the day, they're just people who at one point were looking for a way to escape some kind of pain or turmoil. On March 8th, 2016, in this small western Florida town, a man by the name of Chip Campbell would be seen for the very last time. He was picked up on a security camera of a Circle K gas station, heading to the back bathroom. For those that knew Chip, this video was a revelation. He looked like a shell of his former self, his hair long and unkempt, his appearance gaunt and thin. He looked disheveled, and many that knew him described this as looking like an entirely different person from the brother, friend, neighbor, and co-worker they once knew. Chip was carrying two backpacks, one he was wearing on his back, and the other he was carrying. This same security camera picked up Chip leaving the Circle K gas station, surprisingly, without both of these backpacks. Chip, who had been known by everyone as a quiet, sensitive guy, a gentle giant as described by his sister Laura, promptly disappeared. After stepping out of that gas station on March 8th, at some time between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, he would simply vanish. While the content of the two backpacks he had left in that bathroom would point to a larger, more complicated mystery, I find Chip's story to be a tragedy. This is the story of someone who was misunderstood, who never quite found his place in this world, that, despite having an exterior persona of love and affection, had battled depression and loneliness for his entire life. When he finally began to fall on hard times, he viewed it as his own struggle and refused to share his inner grief with those around him, eventually culminating in a mystery that has gone on for 2 years now. This is the story of Chip Michael Campbell. Welcome to the Unresolved podcast. I'm your host, Michael Whelan, and this is a story that strikes home for me in more ways than one. Normally, I try and keep my own opinions out of the podcast, but this story in particular has caused me to struggle with that notion. Not only do I see myself throughout many of Chip's struggles, I can't help but relate to many of the issues he faced, namely depression and feelings of loneliness. Instead of urging you to head to my Patreon page, I'd rather you spend that money elsewhere for this episode. Class Kids, an organization aimed at helping search and rescue operations for missing persons, did a lot to help the family of Chip Campbell after his disappearance. I'd really recommend you head to their website, classkids.org, to make a donation there this week. Also, the family of Chip Campbell still have a crowd-raising fund set up to raise awareness for their brother. If you are as touched by this story as I am, you could find that at gofundme.com/findchip. That's gofundme.com/findchip. No spaces. I'll include links to both of these in the show notes, as well as links to some helplines you could contact in case you or someone you know are struggling with either depression or an addiction. If you suspect a loved one may have an issue with either, or both, please do not wait. You never know when your time together may run out, so please, reach out and try to help. Now, without any further ado, I'll start from the beginning of this sad and tragic story. I'll be joined by some of Chip's family and friends throughout the episode, who will hopefully help give you an idea of the kind of person Chip was, and how his absence has left a hole in the hearts of many. Reggie Campbell was a cookie distributor living in Western Florida. Throughout the first half of the 1970s, Reggie seemed to have a great life. He was married with 4 kids, 3 daughters named Laura, Lesa, and Donna, and 1 son. Despite the children varying in age, the family was very close-knit. In 1975, Reggie's wife passed away from leukemia. He found himself on the verge of being a very young widower with 4 children to care for. Family members would ask Reggie whether he wanted to have the kids live with them for a short period of time, just until he got back up on his feet. But Lesa recalls Reggie telling them, quote, "My children are my reason for living." This would become a theme that has run through the Campbell family in the years and decades since. That you care for those you consider family, even when you don't have the means to help them. While Reggie was struggling to recover from the loss of his wife, another story was unfolding nearby. A woman named Shirley Gray had been married to her husband, and the two had struggled to have a child throughout their marriage. Shirley would find out from doctors, after a series of miscarriages, that she would likely never be able to have kids. So she and her husband decided to adopt an infant daughter, who, funnily enough, was also named Donna. When baby Donna was 3 years old, Shirley's husband passed away from an illness. Just like Reggie, she found herself as a single parent, struggling to find her way through life. Reggie and Shirley ended up falling in love, in what their family recall as being a whirlwind romance. Before long, they were married, creating what was definitely a full family. As luck would have it, Shirley soon found herself pregnant. This would be the only child from their union, but it resulted in a son, whose story I am bringing to you today. That of Chip Michael Campbell.
Chip was born December 18th, 1979, He is the only natural child to my stepmother, Shirley Campbell. And he is the sixth of children with my father, Reggie Campbell. My father was married. He had four of us kids, Laura, Donna Kay, me, and then Reggie. And then my mother passed away. And a few years later, my father remarried to Shirley. Shirley was unable to have kids, so she adopted a child, which is Donna Sue. And it turns out that Donna Sue is my exact same age. I'm 20 days older than her, which is kind of cool because it was like growing up with a twin, you know. Out of the blue, Shirley got pregnant. And even though she had a lot of medical problems, she actually was able to have a child. And so that's where Chip came. He was born Fort Walton Beach Medical Center. They did a big write-up in the newspaper. I think he was the only boy in the nursery at that time, so they nominated him as the Christmas baby. So he actually came home from the hospital in a stocking. So Chip was very loved, and since birth, we all took turns watching him. We'd have to watch him after school and stuff like that. I and Donna Sue, we were both 12 when Chip was born, so we was old enough to do things, you know, to take care of Chip. It was really cool. We got to see all of his first milestones, you know, first smile, first words, first steps, everything we experienced with him. So when we watched him grow, Chip was actually, you know, he was pretty quiet, content boy. He was happy just playing in the dirt, playing with his cars and trucks and things like that. As he started to get older, he got all the coolest video games. I think it started with the Atari and went from there, went to Nintendo, and he always advanced at all that. When he was 3, we moved from the house that my mother and father had purchased in Crestview, and we moved about 32 miles away to Milton, Florida. And that's the home my father still owns, and where Chip was residing whenever he disappeared. But growing up, he pretty much enjoyed activities like just playing in the dirt. As he got a little older, he learned to play the saxophone. He was actually really good at it. Played in the high school marching band. He just enjoyed things. And unfortunately, when he was 7, his mother just passed away suddenly. So it was kind of a challenge, you know. Chip didn't have a easy childhood growing up, but we all stuck together and we did the best we could with him.
Many think that Shirley's passing may have altered the trajectory of Chip's life, turning him into the quiet man he would eventually become. After his mother's passing, Chip would become morbidly obese, which earned him a good amount of taunting and bullying from kids at school. His older siblings and his best friend, Dennis, would try their best to defend him whenever they could, but even that would further cement Chip into the role he had earned within the family, that of the baby, of the one everyone cared for. Some consider this time period, following the death of his mother and when his issues began to present themselves, that Chip began to pull into himself. He had never really been outgoing, so to speak, but he began to withdraw and become overwhelmingly quiet and shy. His obesity eventually turned into an actual health concern for Chip when he was diagnosed with juvenile diabetes in elementary school. This meant that he would require daily insulin shots, something that would impact his daily life moving forward. But they do recall one of his major passions in life being music. While in school, most notably at Milton High School, Chip began to play the saxophone, and according to those that heard him play, he excelled at it. They say that he was able to create sounds with the saxophone that they had never heard before, bringing all of his inner turmoil into the music itself, creating something that was equal parts tragic and beautiful. Throughout his life, Chip always remained close with his father, Reggie. Being the baby of the family, Chip was the last one still living at home in his formative teenage years. He remained close with his siblings and other family members, of course, but his father Reggie was the one that always seemed to understand Chip. To hear Chip's siblings talk about it, it seems like the two had a really close bond. Chip would continue to live in Reggie's house, on and off throughout his life, finding odd jobs in the area but never really seeming to find a career. Like he had as a child, it seems like Chip had a hard time trying to establish his own identity. A term that many use to describe Chip is gentle giant. From everything I've learned about Chip, this expression fit him to a T. He had grown up quiet and thoughtful, engaging in hobbies that allowed him to be on his own. He continued to play the saxophone, eventually being able to pull off a beautiful rendition of Set Fire to the Rain by Adele. His sister Lisa says that song now holds a special place in her heart because of how much emotion Chip was able to put into it. Chip loved to garden, growing plants and vegetables in his yard. He gave out cactus plants for Christmas one year, and his sisters still have some of those plants. He loved to collect antiques, and he loved to do water related activities, such as fishing. To hear his friends and family talk about it, it makes you feel like you know Chip, or at least someone just like him.
Chip was always very quiet, also, very quiet, very reserved. He was a private person. In fact, after he disappeared, we learned some things about Chip that we even never knew. But like him dabbling into some drugs and stuff like that, because that's not cool. None of us ever did anything like that. But he was a very private person, a very loyal person, and he cared for the people that he loved. He made sure that he'd give you the shirt off his back if he needed to, if he thought you needed it.
Chip was one of those people that, everybody's got their vices and their demons and their battles that they have, but Chip, like you said, gentle giant, man, the dude was just huge, but he was just like the softest, huge guy you'd ever, even his face didn't look intimidating. He was just a big teddy bear, and he was one of those people that quite literally, and I've seen it, he's done it for me, would literally give you the shirt off of his back. He was just one of those guys that even if he had nothing, and he happened to get, a little piece of something, you're getting a piece of that too. You know what I mean? He just took care of his friends and took care of his people, and he was just a really good person. He's a way better person than I ever was, and I hate to tell him that all the time. I'm not a bad person, but Chip was just a genuine good person. You know what I mean?
Chip worked at restaurants throughout his adulthood, primarily as a cook. This is how he met John Claudio, a friend of his.
Man, I've known Chip almost as long as I've been in this area. When I first moved here, a couple years into living here, I got a job as a general manager at Village Inn, which is a breakfast kind of place, 24-hour breakfast place in the area. Chip was one of the cooks there. He was one of the cooks that worked under me. We became friends pretty quickly. Chip's worked for me a couple of times throughout the years. I've been his manager probably about 2 or 3 times. We had mutual friends, a couple of really close mutual friends, like a buddy of mine. We were all like 3 best friends for a very, very long time. For quite a while, me and Chip were more or less just like friends of friends. And then after my divorce or after my separation, whenever me and my wife separated, I went to jail. I had a little bit of an issue with what happened. Came out of jail, had nothing. And Chip, took me in for a little while, and I lived with Chip for about a year, and we became like brothers at that point. We fished to eat every day. It was just one of those like survival with each other kind of experiences where we just, we took care of each other for a year and didn't have shit, you know what I mean? Like both of us, I had lost everything. Chip was struggling, didn't have much, but we had a good time, and we were happy, and we did things to just keep our minds occupied. But that's pretty much the summary of me and Chip's history as far as how we became friends. We met through the industry and had mutual friends, and then just throughout the years, because of our mutual friendships, became closer and closer. And then, once I separated from my wife, and he took me in, let me live there for about a year, that's when we became like really, really close.
At the time of his disappearance, Chip was working at a Denny's diner in Cantonment, a small town roughly 20 miles away from his Milton home. His sister Laura has described his omelets as being the best on the planet, and I'm inclined to believe her. Chip lived on and off at his father's home in Milton until his father started suffering from health issues. His father, Reggie, was sent to live in an assisted living facility after suffering a stroke in April of 2015. This meant that for the first time ever, Chip was living in a home by himself. Well, at least, he was mostly by himself. You see, while having that house to himself, he met the love of his life. No, not a woman, but a young pup named Harley.
He loved his dog too. He was so good with his dog. He had I think it was a white English bulldog. His name was Harley. And I remember the day I picked him up and drove him over to Fort Walton Beach, and he picked up this dog that he had met someone on Craigslist that was giving him away. And he got the dog, and driving Chip and the dog back, I said, well, what are you going to name him? He says, I don't know. I said, well, he looks like a Harley. So that's what he named his dog, and he spent the most time with that dog. He was very well trained, very obedient, and you could tell there was a great bond between him and Harley. He loved that dog. He all he had to do was point and say, go to the kennel, and that dog would go and get in his cage. He was very obedient, and you could tell that Chip loved him, and he spent a lot of time with that dog. I also think, sometimes I think that, Chip was lonely too, because he was living in the house with our father, and our father became ill, and then he had a stroke, and he ended up going to a rehab. So I'm thinking Chip was pretty lonely at the house by himself, just him and the dog. And that's when he allowed people to come, if he had a friend that needed a place to stay, he would let them come and stay with him a little while. He was really good to people.
On Chip's Facebook page, which is still live and has not been touched in nearly 2 years, you could find a handful of pictures. Roughly half of them feature Harley. Many think that Chip's love of Harley was indicative of his very nature. He loved to care for others, and that shined whenever he was around Harley. His friend, John Claudio, who went through a nasty divorce and custody battle a couple of years ago, describes Chip as being a friend who helped him out in his time of need. Chip allowed John to stay in the home for a matter of months, before things started to get a little bit sketchy.
I mean, Chip's always throughout the years. I wouldn't say that he was necessarily addicted to any one particular thing early on in our friendship. But he's dabbled. He's dabbled, and he liked to drink. We used to call him the Chuggernaut. Dude used to chug a pitcher of beer in about 3 seconds flat. So, Chip did have like a little bit of a party edge, and he would like to drink and, have a good time, and he would dabble in certain things. Around about the time when I was living with Chip, I moved out. Like, after about a year of living there, I had moved out and started getting myself situated again. A friend of ours, well, actually a friend of his, Gabe, had gotten out of prison. And I guess he owed Gabe a debt because of something that happened 10 years ago, and Gabe took care of him. So he took Gabe in. This was right about the time when stuff started to get really, really bad. And I kind of had to distance myself from the situation because I was fighting for custody of my kids at the time. But Chip started eating a lot of Xanax, and then the Xanax ran out, and then they started doing meth, and then heroin came into the picture, and it just got really bad round about the times when Tanya and Gabe came around the picture. Before that, I wouldn't necessarily say it was a problem. It was just something he did once in a while. But once Tanya came in the picture, especially once Tanya came in the picture, which Gabe actually brought her around, then it started to get really bad. They were doing meth all the time. And like I said, it still haunts me to this day because part of me wanted to bust through that door and tell him all to get the fuck out of his house and slap Chip into his senses. But at the time, I really couldn't be around the situation because, I was fighting for my kids. But yeah, I would say about the year before he disappeared, the 6 months before he disappeared, that's when it started getting really bad and the really heavy stuff started coming around.
According to his friends and family, Chip had begun associating himself with people that they believe were bad influences. These friends and acquaintances began introducing toxic elements into his life, such as drugs. However, many think that this backslide may have begun beforehand, as the loneliness of living alone began to creep into Chip's life. To hear his family talk about Chip, they were never really aware of any romantic relationships in his life. He was very quiet about things, but he never really talked about girls he was close to or had a serious fling with. Here is his friend John talking about the kind of relationship history that Chip had.
Gabe, whenever Gabe got out of prison, Chip moved Gabe into the house. And, you know, I didn't like Gabe to begin with. I had a very bad impression of him. I felt like things were going to get bad and the drug use was going to get really bad, and it did. Tanya was one of those just dope-head girls that hung out for free drugs. Gabe started bringing her around. I'm pretty sure Gabe was sleeping with her, too, at some point. But for whatever reason, you know, I love Chip to death. Chip's one of the greatest guys I've ever met. And in the 10 years I've known Chip, I've never really seen him with a female. He was just one of those sort of awkward, you know, really sweet guys that girls looked at like, oh, he's a sweet guy, like a big brother. Like, so I've never seen him get much attention from a female. Whenever Tanya came around, and I'm convinced at this point that it was just her manipulating him for, you know, a free place to stay and free drugs and free whatever, but he became really kind of like infatuated with her. They had the same tattoo, they had the same birthday, there was just a bunch of stuff they had in common, and the drug use didn't help, you know, but yeah, I would say that their relationship was, I don't even know if it was a relationship, to be quite honest with you. I don't know that he ever was ever really with her. I think that she just kind of strung him along and kind of played toward his emotions in that sense. You know what I mean?
In the years before his disappearance, Chip's life had begun to slightly unravel. While his father Reggie still lived at the house, he had begun binge drinking, which was turning into something that looked like a problem. At one point, Reggie had apparently found Chip outside of the home, passed out behind the wheel of a car. That was when Reggie sent Chip to go live with his oldest sibling, his sister Laura, for a period of time. She recalls getting him into Alcoholics Anonymous, which worked for a short period of time, but then the loneliness and the shadier acquaintances in his social circle began to creep back in. He had 2 DUI-related incidents happen in the years prior to his 2016 disappearance, in addition to another accident I'll get into shortly. Chip had a couple of good friends in his life, such as John Claudio, who only knew Chip as an adult, and his buddy Dennis, who had grown up with Chip. But outside of that, he only really had his family, who all lived relatively close, but had their own families to care for and their own careers to nurture. Chip began hanging out with friends that were deemed, quote, bad influences by his longtime friends over the following months. These friends were apparently somewhat open about their drug use, at least to the point of his friend, John Claudio, not wanting to be around them with Chip. In November of 2015, through this group of friends, Chip met a young woman that goes by the name of Tanya Rios. Chip apparently took to Tanya really fast, so much so that she was living in the Milton home with Chip by December or early January. That Christmas of 2015, while visiting family, Tanya was brought up by Chip during their conversations. When asked about their relationship, Chip was pretty mum on details, but told his siblings that she was a nurse who was currently out of work. This would later turn out to be false, but there's no way to verify whether Chip knew this at the time. It seems like, to outsiders, that Chip was developing feelings for Tanya. To hear Chip's friend John describe it, Chip had begun to change for Tanya.
Chip started dyeing his hair. You know, we used to call him Silver Fox because he had just straight gray hair for the longest time. And Tanya came around and he dyed his hair black and, you know, just started to really kind of match her vibe. You know what I mean? And he was selling all of his stuff in his house to support her habit. And it just got really bad at that point. But yeah, his personality definitely changed. He really wasn't around much after she was around. They were always together. She really did just use him. It was one of those things where I begged him multiple times. But the few times that I did see him during that period of time, I was like, dude, you got to get her out of your house. You got to get them, get out of the situation. But yeah, it's just he did change quite a bit. He got really heavy into the drug use, and every time I saw or talked to him, he was just incoherent because he was so fucked up all the time.
Chip was also beginning to experience more stark changes in his personality.
December 5th, before he disappeared, a buddy of ours, who I told you we were mutual friends, he called me. I was getting off of work. I was coming home from the interstate, and he basically said, he was like, Chip called me. He's freaking out. He's crying. He's talking about people are going to kill him. He's like, you need to go over there right now. I'm at work. He's like, John, are you off? I'm like, yeah, I'm getting off right now. I'm heading into town. He's like, can you just go by there and check on him? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So I go by Chip's house. It's just Chip there. He's sitting at the dinner table. We sit down for a little while, and we're talking, and I'm trying to, figure out what the hell's going on. And the whole time he just keeps saying that, Tanya's going to get him killed, that they owe somebody money, and that they were in deep with somebody. And I kept trying to get the information out of him, like, who are you talking about? Well, the whole time I was sitting there, his cell phone kept getting text messages. And, to this day, I'm assuming they were from the person that he was in debt to or that was threatening him, because he wouldn't tell me who it was from. He just kept telling me that's them, and kept asking me for my pistol. He was like, John, can you give me your gun? Can you give me your gun? And I'm like, no, dude, I'm not giving you my gun. Like, if you want to tell me what's going on, we can figure it out. Like, we can get you out of here, and you can stay at Jeff's house or my house. We can go ride up on him and figure out what the hell the problem is. Like, we can do whatever you want to do. Just tell me what's up. And he kept telling me, like, no, I'm not going to get you involved like that. I'm not going to get you involved like that. Well, I ended up taking Chip out of that house that night, and he stayed at Jeff's house. That was the first indicator that things were getting really, really serious, that the drug use and Tanya's habit that he was supporting was beginning to be financially too stringent for him. Assuming that they got fronted a bunch of stuff or they were in debt some kind of way to somebody. But it really was one of the situations that day where he was genuine in his fear. Like, he was very specific and genuine in the fact that he said that Tanya was going to get him killed, that they owed somebody big time. And I begged him that day. I was like, dude, get her the fuck out of your house. Like, how much do you owe? Like, I was going to pay it. You know what I mean? I was going to pay whoever he owed. He didn't want me involved. And I really wish, looking back, that I would have put more pressure on it, and really done more to figure out what the hell was going on. Because I'm convinced that day, December 5th, is directly related to his disappearance in some kind of way. That whoever was texting him that day that he was referring to as far as owing money because of Tanya, that person was at least involved or knew who was involved with Chip's disappearance.
As you heard, Chip received text messages in December of 2015 that caused him a great amount of stress. He began to inquire about arming himself for protection and was worried about a debt being owed to somebody, a debt that could have belonged to either him or his new roommate, Tanya.
Yeah, and I to this day don't know the exact details of the text he was receiving, but every time he got one, he would just look at me and be like, man, that's them. Like, and I'm like, dude, like, who is it? Like, tell me what the fuck is going on. And he just refused to let me get involved. And like I said, I'm not a bad person, but I'm also not the type of person to let a good friend of mine, a brother of mine, be threatened. And, I would have done not great things to figure out how to resolve that situation. And I think Chip knew that. And Chip knew that I was fighting for custody of my kids at the time. I was going through a divorce, and it goes back to Chip being that good of a person, caring more about others than himself. He just didn't want me involved because he knew what I was going through at the time. But it is a regret of mine that I didn't get more involved in it, because I could see fear in his eyes that day, and that's not something that Chip really, like you said, Chip's a gentle giant. Like, who the hell hates Chip? Who wants to hurt Chip? You know what I mean? Like, I could never imagine wanting, even if Chip owed me $1,000, I wouldn't want to hurt Chip. You know what I mean?
As if that wasn't enough, it was at this point that Chip began experimenting with drugs, resulting in him becoming a different person altogether.
I had seen Chip. It was the middle of January in 2016, shortly before he disappeared. And I looked at him, and I could see he had grown his hair. His skin looked sort of grayish. He didn't have that usual healthy glow to his skin. I lost a lot of weight, probably 40 pounds or more, and looked like he had like dark circles going around his eyes, and I looked at him and I thought to myself, he looks like he's been using something. But it was so surprising. I looked at him and the first thing I said to him was not, hello, how are you? It's Chip. You look like shit. That's what I told him. And then I realized, oh my goodness, that sounds so horrible. I softened it and I said, well, you look like you just don't feel well. And he said he had explained that he had just wrecked his car just a couple of days before. He was just diagnosed with diabetic seizures and, just explaining little things that had happened to him in the last few days. So I really began to worry about him more at that time.
On January 2nd, 2016, just after 6 p.m., Chip was pulling out of a Circle K gas station located at the junction of Stewart Street and the Munson Highway in Milton. As he was pulling out of the Circle K parking lot, he almost immediately crashed into a blue Chevy Silverado. His black Chevy Neon T-boned the other vehicle, but Chip's car began backing up and continued south on Stewart Street. He then rear-ended a white Ford Fusion before crashing into a bike shop named Truly Spoken. Thankfully, no one else was harmed in these accidents, but Chip was rushed to Sacred Heart of Pensacola Hospital, where he was monitored for what authorities called a medical emergency. This would later be clarified as diabetic seizures, which had resulted in Chip's blood sugar dropping dangerously low and him losing control of the vehicle. This would result in his car getting totaled and his license getting revoked by the state of Florida due to the seizure diagnosis. Without a car, and without any reliable public transportation options, he was now unable to get himself to work. Chip's family would find out later on that Chip had been forced to quit his job, and he filed for disability benefits because his medical diagnosis made it hard for him to get a proper job anywhere nearby. Despite the medical diagnosis being diabetic seizures, those that know Chip think that something else might have been going on. You see, Chip had been a longtime diabetic and had maintained his insulin and blood sugar levels for nearly 30 years. It was odd for him now, in his mid-30s, to go through such a dramatic change. When speaking to his sister, Laura, she brought up the possibility of Chip beginning to use methamphetamine at this point in time. If you're like me and never thought about the effects of meth on someone with diabetes, then the results would be shocking. In essence, meth can greatly increase or decrease blood sugar levels, to the point where someone would feel fine 1 second and then suffer a debilitating change just a moment later. Needless to say, many point to this car accident as being the beginning of Chip's major downward spiral. By March of 2016, things had continued to spiral downwards for Chip. He had been out of work for 2 months now, and even though he had just gotten an EBT card to help pay for groceries and food, he had been struggling. His older brother gave him some odd jobs to do, which he would get paid for. But that was barely enough to scrape by, especially since so much had changed in Chip's life. By this point, he had lost an incredible amount of weight. Once called the Gentle Giant, he was still tall, but he had lost at least 40 pounds, and he was under 200 pounds for the first time in his life. His hair had grown long and shaggy. If you compared this version of Chip to whom he had been less than a year beforehand, you would barely recognize him as the same person. In the preceding 2 months, he had begun walking over to family members' homes on occasion just to get a bite to eat, which was more often than not sandwiches, but he relished any hot meal he could get. After all, at this point, he had no job, close to no money, and now no car. But at least, on March 5th, he had family. His older brother had hired him to do some mundane work for him, and he was getting ready to drop Chip off at his home. Chip asked his brother if they could stop at a nearby Family Dollar, because Chip wanted to pick up some things. Using the EBT card he had gotten that day, he bought some groceries, some cleaning supplies for the home, and some dog food for Harley. At around 6:45 p.m., Chip was dropped off at the home owned by his father on Milton's Ward Basin Road. This would be the last time that any of Chip's family would get to see him on the first Saturday of March, a little under 2 years ago, as of this episode's recording. On March 8th, 2016, at 7:49 p.m., the following Facebook post was made by Chip's roommate, Tanya Rios.
This is a cry for help to any and all of Chip's friends and family. As most of you all know, Chip is my best friend and roommate. The last time I spoke to and saw Chip was Sunday night around 10:30. I was heading out to babysit and wasn't going to be back home until the following afternoon. I text messaged and called Chip consistently all day up until returning to the house, but his phone just went straight to voicemail all day and no texts were responded to, so I just figured he lost his phone. When I got home, the house was in disarray and Chip was missing. His phone was located in the master bathroom with the battery out of it. His wallet wasn't here, so he does have it, wherever he is. I have contacted some of our mutual friends, but I don't have any of his family's numbers. His phone had been factory reset, so I had no access to his contacts. Dawn drove around last night and Thursday afternoon looking for him, and we both have called hospitals, jails, all over, but he's nowhere. Please, guys, if any of you know where he is, can you please at least let us know he's safe? He has diabetes super bad, and it doesn't look as though he took enough insulin pens with him. Just please help us find Chip. He's a wonderful person with a giant-sized heart. If you have any idea or leads that can help us, message either me or Dawn and I'll give you my number. Just please help us find Chip.
What you just heard is Tanya's Facebook post verbatim, minus a few fixed grammatical errors and the omission of a last name. I would like to thank Vanessa from the podcast The Cleaning of John Doe for contributing her time and voice to the podcast. Tanya claimed that the last time anyone had seen Chip was on March 6th at around 10:30 p.m. She had apparently come home the next day and found the home in a state of disarray. Chip's phone was found in the bathroom with the battery pulled out of it. He had taken almost none of his insulin, which was a necessity for someone with diabetes. Even more troubling, Chip's dog, Harley, had been left out. This is something that Chip would never do, as verified by his sister, Lesa. In her Facebook post, Tanya had tagged Chip, so his family and friends were alerted to his disappearance. After all, most of them were unaware of Chip's association with this woman, so they were just as surprised to find out he had a roommate as they were to hear that he had been missing for a matter of now days. After finding this out on Facebook, Chip's siblings began to react. They began to call Chip's phone, and much to their surprise, the mysterious woman named Tanya answered. She told the Campbell family that she had found Chip's phone in the bathroom of the home, and was now trying to figure out what had happened to him. When Chip's family proposed calling the police, Tanya rebutted. She said she did not want the police to get involved, and for good reason. More on that later. Chip's oldest sister, Laura, who lived 6 hours away in Alabama, drove to Milton that very night. When she arrived, she found 2 cars in the driveway, one belonging to Tanya and the other belonging to a man named Don. This is the Don that Tanya mentioned in her Facebook post, who was a mutual friend of both her and Chip. I've since tried to reach out to this Don, but I have not heard back.
I wasn't really sure, but I had been worried about Chip for a couple of months before that, and I was worried about some of the company that was around whenever I would go to the house there. I always had like a bad feeling. It wasn't anything anybody said or did. It was just a feeling that I had. I was a little worried about the company that he was keeping. So in early, March, it was the first week of March, whenever Tanya had put that post up that Chip was nowhere to be found, and her and Don had looked everywhere, then that's when I just called the Santa Rosa Sheriff's Office and I said, hey, can you go check on my brother? There's this Facebook post. I had already spoke with all the siblings, Reggie, Laura, Donna Kay, Donna Sue, everyone. Nobody knew where Chip was.
The police were called, and Officer Danny Tussler was the one who responded. He conducted a thorough search of the home and took a statement from everyone involved. In this statement, Tanya painted a much more alarming picture of Chip's home. She claims that on the day she returned to the Campbell residence, she found a reclining chair blocking the front door. She was able to push the door open, but upon entering, discovered that the home was a mess and the side door had been left wide open. The door to the refrigerator had also been left open, and there were vials of Chip's insulin laying on the kitchen floor. She also allegedly found a duffel bag of clothing which was left on Chip's bed. Apparently, Chip's dog, Harley, had been roaming loose, and mud had been tracked throughout the home. Both of these things were alarming, and you don't have to take my word for it. All of his siblings have spoken at length about Chip's relationship with Harley, and how he would never let her roam free when he was not home. Harley had been found in the house, not put into a kennel or a bedroom as Chip would normally do if he left. Other than Harley, the family knew that the person who would take Chip's disappearance the hardest would be Chip's father, Reggie. Reggie still technically owned the home Chip was living in, but he lived in an assisted living facility after having medical issues in 2015. The family members called the workers of the facility and asked them to avoid the news in the morning. They didn't want that to be how Reggie learned of his son's disappearance. Even though it would break their hearts, they had to tell him in person. Chip's sisters have talked about that being the hardest part to deal with in the wake of Chip's disappearance. Apparently, those that look after him had to stop him in the parking lot of the facility when he tried to wheel himself away to go help look for his son. The police investigation to find Chip began, but it unfortunately did not have much information to go off of. There was a 3-day window in which Chip might have gone missing, from when his brother had last seen him at around 7 p.m. on March 5th, to when Tanya made her ominous Facebook post on the evening of March 8th. Tanya claims to have seen him on Sunday evening, the 6th of March, before leaving to babysit, so police began to operate under the assumption that he had disappeared between then and when Tanya returned home. After scouring the area, police quickly evaporated most of their leads. Nobody that knew Chip had seen him, other than Tanya. It appeared that his quiet nature had gotten the better of him. However, they quickly found evidence pointing to a suspicious sighting of Chip at a nearby Circle K. This Circle K, located on the corner of Stewart Street and the Munson Highway, is right across the street from Milton High School. It's also a stone's throw away from Milton City Hall and is approximately 3 miles away from Chip's home on Ward Basin Road. This Circle K produced video evidence of Chip walking into the store on Tuesday, March 8th, sometime between 2 and 4 p.m. In this footage, which is somewhat grainy, Chip looks entirely different from the photos taken of him just months prior. He had lost a good amount of weight, his clothes looking baggy on him. His hair, which had always been cut short and graying, was now long and shaggy. He had apparently dyed his hair a darker color in the preceding months, according to his friend John, because he wanted to fit in with Tanya and her group of friends. In this footage, Chip is wearing a backpack and carrying another. He walks from the front of the store towards the back bathrooms, where the area of the recording cuts out. A minute or two later, Chip returns from the bathrooms, with neither backpack in his possession. Many have pointed towards Chip potentially having a black eye in the Circle K video footage, but in my opinion, the footage is too grainy to try and pick apart his features. It is possible that he does have a black eye, but this could be due to any number of reasons, such as drug use, lack of sleep, a physical altercation, etc. Both of the backpacks he had been carrying would be discovered by police. The security footage from Circle K that captured Chip saw two people enter the bathroom after him, and the second of these men reported the backpacks to the employees. They were held behind the counter for a period of time before being thrown into the dumpsters. Almost 2 weeks after Chip disappeared, the police were able to recover these backpacks from the dumpster, and their belongings have been one of the oddest parts of this mystery. In the first backpack, Chip had been carrying an assortment of documents. He had his EBT card, which he had just gotten days beforehand, along with his own social security card, a copy of his father's birth certificate, and 2 blank bank deposit forms. He had also been carrying some medical supplies, such as diabetic testing lancets, a single vial of insulin along with its injector, and something useful for Chip's asthma, most likely an inhaler of some kind. In these backpacks were also clothing, food, and some small supplies that someone would need should they be heading off to parts unknown. These consisted of rope, paper, pens and pencils, snacks, etc. The insulin and snack items make some sense, as Chip was diabetic, and both of those items would be useful for someone whose blood sugar needed constant maintenance. But his father's birth certificate being among his possessions proposes some interesting thoughts, such as him trying to protect this information from someone. As police began to decipher this newfound evidence, Chip's family began to focus their attention on those they suspected of leading Chip down the wrong path over the preceding months. And at the top of that list was Chip's roommate, one of the last people to admit seeing him, none other than Tanya Rios. Tanya Vanessa Rios was born on December 17th, 1982. This birthday was one of the things that made her instantly relatable to Chip. His birthday was December 18th, so it had immediately become a neat little icebreaker for the two of them. According to most records, it looks like Tanya grew up in Florida. She has family living in Key West and was married at one point. Her ex-husband, a guy named Chris, was a military veteran who had 2 children with Tanya in their short-lived marriage, a boy and a girl. When their marriage fell apart, it seems like so did Tanya's life. She lost custody of their children, who have been raised by a family member in the years since. Tanya has gone on to be known as Braids, with a Z at the end, and she worked as a DJ in Florida and California. After her divorce from Chris, she apparently began dabbling with illegal activities, as the Campbell family would later learn. When going through Chip's belongings, they found some ID cards and documents with the social security number of one of Tanya's ex-husband's cousins. Chip had told his family members that Tanya was an out-of-work nurse, but nothing I have found indicates that she ever did work as a nurse. This, to me, implies that it was something she made up, or it was an excuse Chip was giving to make her more relatable to his family. After police were called to examine Chip's home on the night of his disappearance, the responding officers had looked into Tanya. According to some rumors, she had given the police a fake name, and police were able to find out why she had done so. You see, Tanya Rios had been arrested at least once before, and she had an outstanding warrant from neighboring Escambia County. Police went and arrested Tanya on this outstanding warrant on the day after Chip was reported missing, on March 9th. It looks like she was able to bond out just a few days later, and after her release, she returned to the home she had been living in, which was still owned by Reggie Campbell. Chip's family, aware that Tanya had returned to the home, wanted to kick her out. However, she began claiming squatters' rights, and they had to go through the legal process to get her evicted. This took weeks of time, over $500, and an endless amount of paperwork, and throughout that time, the family would do drive-bys of the home to ensure that nothing overly sketchy was going on. They made sure to post eviction notices on the exterior of every door, It was during this period of time, as Chip's siblings were doing what they could to track down Chip and try to regain control of their family's home, that they received some bad news. Chip's older brother, who was the power of attorney for their father, Reggie, received a call from their bank. It seemed like the account belonging to Reggie had been overdrawn due to some recent activity. When the family investigated, they discovered that someone had forged their father's name on 7 different checks. This someone, it would later be determined, was none other than Tanya, Chip's roommate. Tanya, who had been living alone in Chip's home for the better part of a month, was arrested again on April 15th, 2016. The charges included larceny, exploitation of the elderly, fraud, and possession of drug equipment. Now that the family were able to get back into the home, they discovered what a mess it was. The entire house was in disarray, and it was covered in filth. There was paraphernalia everywhere, with most of the dishware and silverware being permanently damaged, if not missing. The remaining spoons, in particular, were bent and broken, with several pots and pans having been used outside in a fire pit. To the family, this made one thing crystal clear: that the home had been used as a drug den in the months beforehand, and that Chip was likely involved.
Chip's home, that is Chip's childhood home. He lived in that home since he was 3 years old. He has a lot of extended family that live right down that road. I just don't see it. I don't think that Chip just ran away. I will say that I won't rule it out as a possibility. It's possible he could have just gotten so afraid of something or someone that he said, hey, I need a break, or, my life is out of control, or, is it possible? Sure, that's possible. But when you think about and consider all things in the circumstance, it leads me to think more that something has happened to him.
Yeah, my personal impression of what happened is I feel like from December 5th that Chip had a debt to somebody for drugs, most likely meth. I feel like going forward from there that Chip probably made some kind of deal to, I feel like he had worked out some kind of deal to, let somebody cook in his house or whatever the hell was. But that video of him in Circle K, I'm 100% convinced it was a dead drop. I think he was either dropping money in Circle K or whatever it was. But I do feel like that's related to his disappearance as far as like the debt he owed or the involvement in the drug activity. Nobody walks into a gas station with 2 backpacks and walks out with none, if they're not leaving something behind.
Despite Tanya's arrest, she was not in prison for long. Tanya was arrested in April, and it looks like she was able to get released on bond a short time later. She was then arrested in July, but again was able to make bail. Chip's friends and family recall this as being a very odd series of events. Normally, when someone is arrested, they're given the option to post bond and make bail. This always depends on the crimes they've been arrested for, as well as their criminal history. At this point, Tanya had been arrested a handful of times. The charges filed against her were mostly drug-related, but now included some felonies that could put her behind bars for a few years. Despite her history of running away and skipping out on bond, she was allowed to make bail once again. This time, in 2016, Tanya decided to run away once again. She disappeared entirely, falling off of the grid. She stopped using her primary Facebook page, but created a few others, which allowed her to communicate with family and friends of various social circles. Rumors reached Chip's family that Tanya had moved out to Sacramento, California, where she had begun posting online once again as Braids, her DJ persona. In August and September of this year, after evading police for over a year, Tanya was captured in Sacramento. She was transferred back to Santa Rosa County, where she has been awaiting trial for the past few months.
Oh, no, and she absolutely knows. And that's the part that gets me with, with all this stuff you have on her and all these charges you have on her. why aren't we pressuring her? You know, like she knows. That's the one thing I have said from day one to her. Like, she is god awfully afraid of me because I told her, I'm like, I know you know. Well, and she's contacted me like throughout the last year and a half and tried to convince me of her story. Like when she was in California, she called me through Facebook and, you know, just was like, I just want to explain to you what happened. And I'm like, look, I don't want to hear your lies. Like, if you're going to tell me the truth about where he's at, let me know, but I don't want to hear your lies right now, you know? But she's tried to feed me her nonsense a couple of times, and she's just a liar. Like, you know, she told me that Chip took off to Alabama and that he was living in the woods, and I'm like, this shit's full of shit. Like, I just don't. You're telling me you had no idea what happened. Everything that was going on, you had no idea what happened, who did what to him, nothing. And she's just a liar, man. Like, that's what it comes down to. Is she's just full of it. I've never trusted a word she said, and I feel like 100% she's full of shit. But as far as her saying she doesn't know what happened, that's a lie.
I will be updating you further on any developments in her case, and whether or not it pertains to Chip Campbell. But I would just like to state that Tanya has not been officially accused of any wrongdoing in the disappearance of Chip. While it's very easy to point out her flaws, I stand with Chip's family who want Tanya to get help. Hopefully, in her recovery, she'll be able to provide a clearer picture of the troubles she and Chip were facing before his disappearance, and whether she knows something more than she's letting on. In the aftermath of Chip's disappearance, his family and friends banded together to try and piece together the mysteries he left behind. His older sister, Laura, stayed in Milton for the next 6 weeks, trying to stay close to the investigation. She wanted to be there to help out however she could, and try to serve as a point person for the search parties. Most of these searches were done by volunteers from Class Kids, a search and rescue organization set up to find missing children and family members. Partnering with Milton's Canine Academy, the groups have not only put up flyers and hosted public events to inform the public about Chip's disappearance. They have also conducted searches of the area around Chip's home and where he was last seen. Unfortunately, the groups have had no real luck. Even when using accredited, trained cadaver dogs and highly specialized search canines, they were unable to find anything that suggested a death or even a struggle within his home. Hope was raised in May of 2017 when remains were discovered by Milton's Canine Academy German Shepherds, Gunnar and Maxwell, but those were later determined to be animal remains. The Campbell family were able to get Tanya legally evicted a little over a month after Chip disappeared, and that's when they found the home in its poor condition. However, that would not be the only strange state of affairs regarding the house. After getting Tanya evicted, Chip's older sister, Donna, moved into the home. She began to box up belongings of the prior tenants, including Tanya, Chip, and their father, Reggie. During this, she found several odd items in Tanya's possession, including the ID card and social security paperwork belonging to Tanya's ex-husband's cousin, which I mentioned earlier, as well as a receipt for gloves and ammunition bought at a Pensacola Walmart just a short time before Chip disappeared. And if that wasn't enough, the month of June would see one of the strangest revelations in this story.
Right after we realized that Chip was indeed missing, I believe by 6 a.m. we had a sister there driving by that house that morning. There. Myself and my husband and my sister Donna Sue, everyone, we all got together. We dropped our lives basically to go there. And we all ended up staying like 3 weeks at my brother's house in Milton, and completely focused on every day going out to search to find him, to talk with the detectives, to work with Class Kids. And we noticed around the house there was this big pile of debris, and it looked like it was a big burn pile actually, and we couldn't figure out, the things that were in it, pots and pans and spoons and we couldn't figure out why would someone be burning all this stuff. And you look in the kitchen, and this is my father's home, who's been married. He's had 2 wives. He's had tons of dishes in his 40 years of being an adult. And there is not a spoon, a fork, none of that. Nothing. No kind of utensils in the kitchen. Okay? So we were all really puzzled, like, why? You know. Also, before the meth lab was discovered, there was this gentleman who came to the door, and my sister Donna Kay was living at my father's home, and he was asking about cutting the grass, and she put her shoes on, and by the time she put her shoes on and walked outside, he was already in the backyard, looking all around, asking all kinds of questions, and like, what's going on here? And she said she couldn't figure out why. He kept looking at the roof and all around the house. And one of the investigators said, you know, there's something in that house. And she brought a ladder and put it up, and they went in the attic, and that's when they found there was a meth lab up there.
I have been told the name of this man, but I don't want to reveal it through this podcast, in case the criminal investigation to finding out what happened to Chip includes him in the future. I will say, though, that he has been arrested twice over the past year, including once for battery and obstructing justice, and another for DUI. He has a criminal history, and many believe him to be involved in the drug operation, hence why he was trying to get into the house. Perhaps he knew about the upstairs meth lab, and he was trying to recover whatever he could. It's possible that if he was informed about the drug operation, then he might have more knowledge about what Chip Campbell was potentially tied up in, and what may have caused him to go missing.
It seemed to click that possibly they were cooking some meth. My opinion is that Chip knew that my sister Donna Kay was going to come and stay at the home for a while, and I think that he knew that that was not going to go. It was not going to be okay to do that. I honestly think that Chip was getting rid of all that. And in my opinion, is it possible that that action made someone angry? Maybe the owner of the meth lab, maybe, possibly. I don't know, but it seems like that could be what has happened.
It's rare that you find people like that, and just people that are just genuinely good people, and despite or in spite of whatever the situation was that he was involved in, or whatever, however deep he got in the drug use or whatever activity was. But that aside, I mean, doesn't change the fact that Chip was one of the best people I knew, one of the best people I knew, and it just, for him to just go and just be made to disappear without a trace, without any kind of closure for the family, without any kind of explanation or anything, it's just, he's not the person that I would have expected that to happen to. You know what I mean? I've been too long. Like, I'm just at the point now where, like I said, I just want his family and us just to be able to bury our fucking brother. You know what I mean? Like, that's really the biggest thing. It's just such a sad thing that it's being left open like this, and nobody knows what happened. You know?
It's hard for me to talk about Chip Campbell without getting emotional. I see so much of myself in him. The issues with depression, loneliness, self-confidence, you name it. Whereas so many stories I've featured on the podcast have scared me, reminding me to lock my doors and windows at night. This is one of the first that made me examine my life and make me thankful for all of the advantages I have. I hope many of you feel the same. It does warm my heart somewhat that someone like Chip, who kept so much of his personal life secret and closely guarded his emotions, has warranted such a response from those lucky enough to know him. Everyone that knew Chip Campbell has nothing but great things to say about him. They all have different nicknames for him. The Gentle Giant, the Silver Fox, the Chugginator. All come from a place of love. Those that did love him hope that he is still out there, alive, ready to return home at any moment. They hope, with their heart of hearts, that he may have just found himself in something too insurmountable to overcome, so he decided to run away and live in the woods.
I mean, really, at this point, like, I just want closure for the family. I just want to be able to bury my friend because I'm, like I said, I'm the pessimist of the group, and I am hopeful that he is out there. I mean, God, I would love for him to just turn up and be like, hey, I've been, camping for a year, but I'm also a realist, and I don't see that being likely. Just given the situation and how he left and left his dog behind and hasn't contacted me at all in any kind of way. I just don't. Not to mention just the situation and the drug involvement and the meth lab afterwards. Like, there was something serious going on. Something very serious was going on with people. I've done my fair share of things. I grew up in South Florida, and I've got friends and family, and I've done it myself where I've dabbled in dealing and just other little shit. But with like meth and meth heads and stuff like that, man, like, they're just dangerously unpredictable, and I feel like whoever he owed money to, like, I don't know if they intentionally harmed him, but they came to that house that day to scare him or hurt him or get something from him. And hell, maybe he got hurt accidentally and they freaked out and they, covered it up, got rid of him, whatever. But I don't see the likelihood that he's still alive. I just doubt it. Chip's gone. I know that. I'm convinced he's dead, and I hate saying that out loud, and I try not to say it to his sisters and stuff, but the likelihood of him not being dead is very unlikely. Chip loved his dog, first off. He would have never left his dog behind anywhere. He would have called me or somebody and told somebody to watch the dog. Also, Chip's extremely diabetic. He didn't bring any insulin with him. I've seen Chip pass out from not eating for a couple hours. That's not something he would be able to do without insulin. And also, that aside, like, Chip's one of my best friends. Dude, after a year, you're talking about over a year now, Chip would have contacted me if he was still alive. He would have contacted me in some kind of way, either indirectly or, through, like, an alternate account with a different name. He would have made a Facebook and called it the Juggernaut or something. Like, I would have heard from him by now if he was alive.
Based on everything that was going on and the fact that we learned later on that he was afraid of someone, my biggest instinct is to think that something has happened to Chip. I have no proof that something has happened. Of course, if we would find him somewhere, that would be good proof, right? But is it possible that Chip just ran off? I think it's possible. But then I think also of all the things that have happened in the last year and a half, the amount of media coverage and searches that have been done for Chip, and we've seen nothing and heard nothing. And also the fact that we, just a few months ago, had a really major hurricane that was televised nationally. I just think that there's been so many things that have brought a lot of public attention. We would have heard something by now. That if he was out there, he would have reached out somehow. So remember, Chip is actually a very caring person, and I don't think that Chip would have ever left his dog like that.
Chip was a diabetic, and without any insulin, it would be almost impossible for him to make it. Between his downward spiral, his burgeoning substance abuse problems, and his worries of being in danger, his loved ones have accepted that Chip is most likely not with them anymore. But even though they've accepted that, they have not accepted the fact that there have been no answers to any of their questions. Chip was last seen in a Circle K. Circle K serves almost as a beacon of his downward spiral. His home on Ward Basin Road was located down the street from a Circle K. His life-changing car accident, officially caused by his diagnosis of diabetic seizures, happened right outside of the Circle K where he was last seen, on Milton Stewart Street. Many, including his own family, think that the car accident was the alarm that should have told them something was wrong. That perhaps the trigger wasn't necessarily Chip's worsening diabetes, but perhaps his drug use, which would go on to consume his life. If you look on Google Maps, you'll notice that many of the locations in Milton were last updated in April of 2016. This was just a month or so after Chip disappeared, mere weeks later. It's almost odd being able to see the world as it was then, when Chip's friends and family still held out hope that he would return home without issue. Now it's been nearly 2 years, and the world looks a lot colder than it did then.
I just hope that somehow he's out there somewhere, and he would hear this story and know that it's okay to talk to us. You know, we love him, and we'll try to get him all the help he could possibly use. If he's still around and he's still able, we'd be happy to have him be back home. And if he's not, my prayer is that he knows he's loved, and it would still be great to bring him back home and at least know what happened.
Before I begin to wrap things up, I just want to touch on a theory that I haven't really addressed so far. The theory that Chip is still alive, out there, somewhere. In the immediate aftermath of Chip's disappearance, police began to focus on him as a runaway. Unlike some of the other stories I've covered, this theory did not just appear out of nowhere. His family members reported to police that Chip had suffered a long period of depression, especially in the months after his car accident outside of the Circle K where he would last be seen on security cameras. They were just worried that, in his latest bout of depression and with the fear for his life, that he might do something drastic. These family members reported that Chip may have taken a handgun belonging to a family member. This was the same family member that lived nearby Chip, where he would go for sandwiches or meals after losing his car and his job. Surprisingly, this family member would report the pistol missing. The gun, which is a Taurus 380 ACP high-point handgun, is still missing to this day, and has been reported to all of the available agencies. Police were contacted by Chip's lifelong friend, Dennis, who told them that Chip had talked about going, quote, off the grid in the days and weeks before his disappearance. With the theft of the handgun, police began to become convinced that Chip had followed through on this. Later, they would find a text from Chip to another one of his friends, which claimed to have gotten a hold of a pistol, cementing this idea in the early investigation. I've told you about the security camera footage of Chip, which was taken from the Circle K on the afternoon of March 8, 2016. Well, police would later find additional security footage of Chip from the surrounding area. This footage showed Chip walking north from that Circle K, towards the area of the Blackwater Heritage Trail. This trail, which is approximately 8 miles in length, runs through some woodlands and leads up to the Blackwater Wildlife Area, which is, in itself, a giant swath of land. It would be a prime place for someone to live, quote, off the grid, as Chip had mentioned to his friends. Police investigated this trail and found no trace of Chip, but then again, there are countless foot trails that lead further into the woods. Is it possible that Chip went off to live as a mountain man? With his asthma and diabetes, it's very unlikely. On April 23, 2016, just about a month after Chip disappeared, a witness at Lenny's sub shop in Mary Esther, Florida, reported seeing a man that looked like Chip Campbell. Mary Esther is a town about an hour southeast of Milton, right along the Florida coastline. This witness saw a man matching Chip's description wearing a white hat, a black jacket, black pants, and old-looking white and black tennis shoes. This incident was reported over a week later, so the security footage had already been written over, but the incident occurred at roughly 6:20 p.m. Is it possible that this mysterious man was Chip Campbell? In my opinion, absolutely. But at this point, Chip's family and friends who knew him best don't think that he would be so cruel and withhold his whereabouts from them for so long.
That he was a great person and he deserves better. That no matter what the problem was or what the debt was or what the issue was, that Chip's family, Chip himself, his friends deserve some kind of closure. He was a good person. You know, there's people, and I've even said this about myself throughout this whole investigation, that like I've done things that weren't great, and it's one of those, there are people in the world that shit like this happens to, and nobody misses, you know what I mean? Like, you look at the situation and you're like, oh, well, they deserved it. They brought it on themselves. They're a piece of shit, whatever the case may be. Chip's not that person. Chip was never that person. Like, did he fall into some really dark times towards the end and probably get himself a little too in deep in a situation he couldn't get out of? Yeah, absolutely. But Chip deserves better, and Chip doesn't deserve to be, left in a ditch somewhere or whatever the case may be. Like, he was one of those people that no matter what the situation was, like, he would have done what he did, whatever he could to make it right. Really, that's it, man. Just that he's a way better person than me, man, and deserves better than what ever happened to him.
Somebody out there knows something. I just wish they would talk, because you can't even imagine what it's like to have someone that you love, that you care about, just go missing. One day they're fine, they're here, and the next day you're trying to contact them, and they don't call, they don't come home, they don't take care of the responsibilities that they have, and something's wrong. It's the worst feeling, and until you actually experience it yourself, you won't understand. But believe me, those of us families left behind, we're sort of like a really weird group to belong to, because we all understand each other, and it's sort of like a strange clan, and I really hope that people will stop having to experience this. I believe, I don't know how many, every 40 seconds someone goes missing. That's an alarming statistic, and I hear of those who have family members that are missing for 20, 30 years or more. And I think that's really sad. I really hope that somehow we can get a little better at finding out what happened, for finding these missing loved ones. I thank you and people just like you who dedicate their time and their attention to bring awareness to these cases, to get it out in the public, because someone knows something. And if we could just get those people to come forward, or just to speak something, even if they don't think it's significant, it could hold the key to an answer to what happened. So thank you very much, Michael. We really appreciate all the work that you're doing to bring awareness. It brings a form of comfort also to families who are able to talk about the ones they love. I really, really appreciate your help. And anyone else out there listening has a family member that's gone missing, you're not alone. Then we're all here for each other, okay?
Chip's story has been featured on at least 3 other podcasts over the past few months: The Vanished, The Apex and the Abyss, and Unfound. All have offered opinions and insight into the case, and I, along with Chip's friends and family, are grateful to them for featuring his story. Chip Michael Campbell was approximately 6 feet and 2 inches tall, and weighed roughly 190 pounds at the time of his disappearance. He was 36 years old, with graying brown hair and brown eyes. He had a tattoo on his upper left arm, which was a frog with bat wings set in outer space. He had once worn a nose piercing, but had not been seen with it for some time before his disappearance. Chip had gotten into a fight roughly 8 or 9 years ago, and he broke his jaw as a result. These injuries may match up with some record somewhere, so please keep that in mind. Chip was last seen wearing a long-sleeved camo print t-shirt, blue jeans, and size 13 white sneakers. If you have any information about Chip Campbell, you could contact the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office. The official in charge of the case, Detective Duron Nelson, can be phoned at 850-983-2234. Chip's family are still hoping to raise funding to hire a private investigator who will hopefully be able to do some digging and conduct research that they, themselves, are unable to do so. If you have been touched by this story as I have, you could head to gofundme.com/findchip to support their efforts. And of course, Class Kids, the non-profit organization that helped conduct searches for Chip, could always use an extra little bit of help. You could head to their website, classkids.org, that's KLAASKIDS.org, to learn more and donate. As I've told those I've spoken to regarding Chip, I hope to be able to bring you an update in the near future, telling you that Chip's case file has been closed. However, until such time, I can only say that the story of Chip Michael Campbell remains unresolved. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Unresolved podcast. I would like to give a special thank you to Chip's entire family and his cast of friends. I was lucky to be able to speak to his sisters and his friends throughout the making of this episode, and I'm so grateful to all of them. I am also so grateful to have the support and assistance of the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office, who contributed their police records to clarify some information for me. Thank you. I honestly don't know what to say after such an episode. The story of Chip Campbell has had quite a profound impact on me. When speaking to his sister, Laura, she told me that she only hoped Chip's story could serve as a tool for someone struggling with their own demons, whether they be depression, loneliness, or substance abuse. If you are struggling with anything this holiday season, please reach out to those close to you. And if they don't have the time, reach out to someone who can help. Hell, reach out to me. I may be pretty crummy about responding to emails in a timely manner, but I can hopefully help you get in touch with someone who can help you out. Just please, everyone, even if you feel alone in this world, you're not. There's someone out there that loves you, and they do whatever they could to help you. So please, just don't bury your problems and hope they'll disappear. You need to work through them, but there are people out there who can help you with that. If you would like to stay in touch with me, you could do so via social media, at UnresolvedPod on Twitter or /UnresolvedPod on Facebook. The podcast can be reached through email, either theunresolvedpodcast@gmail.com or michael@unresolved.me. Once again, that's Michael, E before the A. It's weird, I know. You could also get in touch via phone. You could send in your text and voicemails to 831-200-3550. If you would like to support the podcast, you could do so by simply heading to iTunes and leaving the podcast a 5-star rating and a positive review. If you want to go above and beyond that, you could head to patreon.com/unresolvedpod to get access to some cool perks I've tried to set up. That is, of course, after you go to Chip's family's GoFundMe page and donating to Class Kids. Before I wrap things up, I just want to give out a quick shout out to the patrons who have helped support the podcast, and to my friends Vanessa Fearson and Tyson Nordgren. Vanessa, as you may all know, is the host of the Cleaning of John Doe podcast, and she recorded a little segment for this episode. Her podcast is great, so please go and check it out. Also, I need to thank Tyson for constantly helping out with the podcast. He consistently offers his outstanding original music and production expertise to the podcast, and I am so grateful. Thanks, buddy. Also, if any of you are in the market for some podcast editing, you could head to Audio Productions. They've been helping me out with the editing, and they've done a great job. Sadly, this will probably be the last official episode of 2017. I have something fun planned for the weekend before Christmas, but I'll probably be taking a week or so off afterwards. However, I think you'll all enjoy what I have planned for this next episode. If you've been a fan of my prior April Fool's holiday specials, I think you'll find it fun. I'll be featuring some guests which many of you may probably be pretty familiar with. Hopefully that'll help liven up spirits. But until next time, I hope you all stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.